Hey, this is Grace Fellows from Towse, and I'm going to show you my Ableton Live setup. I basically want to make this video to save you guys some time because I watched like 20 different videos and read a book about Ableton to try to figure this out, and I still didn't really get all the answers that I needed. Yeah, so because I make kind of like folk pop music, it can be kind of hard to find examples of people using Ableton in the way that I want to use it. I have actually already been using Ableton for 5 or 6 years as a recording DAW, and I'm really comfortable in arrangement view. But I just a couple weeks ago started learning session view for the first time and learning how to trigger clips and scenes and everything like that, which has been really cool. So basically the things that I wanted to learn were how to live record loops and then trigger them, and also how to trigger loops that are already there or arrangements that are already there, like stems from my songs, backing vocals alongside me playing live, that sort of thing. The reason I wanted to learn how to do this was just so that I could get a more engaging live show in my solo sets, or even with a band, just to have maybe say I have a rhythm section, but I'd like to have backing vocals as well, or I'm playing piano, but I'd like to have some guitar lines that add texture and stuff like that. Another totally different category of like why I wanted to do this project in the first place was because I have a bunch of recorded songs, especially my song-a-days and some of my Instagram reels and that sort of thing, which you guys might have seen. Basically, they were all written in Ableton, and it was just me maybe looping guitars or something like that, and using a bunch of MIDI and synth basses and that sort of thing. I couldn't really figure out any way to perform these things live. I did make them in arrangement view, but I'm trying to learn how to rearrange them into session view and trigger them there so that I can play those songs in like a live setting, as well as do some of those loops like live so that it gives a more engaging experience. The first thing I needed to do to start on this process was to get inspired. So I tried to find some people who were doing a similar setup just so I could get an idea of what's possible. It was kind of hard again to find people in my genre doing it. In fact, I don't think I really did find anyone specifically in my genre. The thing I liked about these people were that each of them was using live creatively in their own way to realize their own music, their own arrangements, and it was a combination of kind of electronic sounds and folk or indie vibes as well. Next thing I'm going to do is show you my signal flow. So that's just all the gear that I'm using and how it's set up, how it's connected to each other. So let me show you that. First of all, I have this interface, which is the Universal Audio Apollo Twin, and I have that plugged into the mic I'm currently speaking into and also into a jack cable that runs to my guitar. The white plug goes to my computer and the black one is the power. I have my monitoring headphones there, and here's my laptop. Final Cut is actually open right now, recording my voiceover. And then for the live setup, I had this mic stand with the mic I'm currently speaking into and my 88 key Yamaha P125 as a MIDI controller. Now that's the only piece of gear I actually bought for this project. It was about £8 on Amazon, and it was just the USB-B to USB-C converter, which allowed me to use my 88 key keyboard as a MIDI controller. Now, it would of course be better to have a real MIDI controller rather than my just full-on 88 key keyboard, especially maybe something with foot pedal triggers or a little bit of a keyboard so that I can still play like bass lines and stuff like that. But my goal with this project was really just to focus on using what I already have and making the most of it. Also, you can see my Danelectro here, which is what was plugged into that jack cable earlier, so there's that continuity for you, and isn't she pretty? So here's my set. It's called Manic, Pixie, that's the song title. And here's an arrangement view recording of the set as I performed it earlier for the demonstration that you'll see at the end of this video. First of all, just in some setup things, how I got all the signal flow connected. So this is some basic stuff if you don't know, but I'm just gonna go through it with you because sometimes there's like one little detail that you just can't figure out why it's not working, and I'm gonna make sure you don't have that problem. So first we're gonna go to preferences and make sure that the input device is the correct interface. For me, that's my universal audio. And right now I'm going to my speakers, but I did have it to external headphones when I was recording. And then for the MIDI control, once it's plugged in and it's on, you just wanna make sure that the track thing is on if you wanna use it to play instruments, and then the remote one is on for if you would like to use it as a MIDI controller. I had this issue earlier. I only had the track one on and not remote, so I was only able to play notes. I wasn't able to use it to trigger scenes and clips. Some other basic stuff, I have my global quantization set to 4 bars so that when I trigger a scene or a record button, it will wait until the end of my phrases to start So that gives me a little bit of leeway on when I can press buttons and stuff, which is really helpful for live recordings. Obviously you can choose whichever length works for you, but that was what worked for this song. As well as I have a count in of 1 bar again, so that I can just at the beginning of the recording actually make it on time to be playing notes. Some other things I've done to make this easier on myself, I have just dragged my clips to be smaller. Also knowing where this little dial is, that tells you how loud your metronome is. Again, something that's really helpful if you're doing live recordings, because sometimes the metronome can be really loud and annoying and even be picked up in your microphone. Another thing I had to do was make sure that the volume knob was down on my keyboard, because otherwise when I played MIDI notes into these tracks, you would hear the keyboard sound as well as whatever MIDI sound I was trying to get. Then I would just drag the sounds into here. So I would go into the sound library and put like, here's my bass sound that I like for this track, and then I could play it on the piano. That's my bass sound, and then I have a drum patch as well. And here are the actual clips I recorded earlier. So that's the bass sound. And here's my drum loop. Really, really simple loops. All the rest of my tracks are audio tracks. This one is my lead vocal, so I had to make sure that it was record enabled the entire time that I was recording. If I record enable it right now, it will create awful feedback because I'm playing out of my speakers, so that's also something to realize. But yeah, I have all my input monitoring set to auto. I also have this track enabled for my guitar. Just like this vocal track, this guitar track was just recording into arrangement view and wasn't really doing much in session view. So then the next thing that was really important to realize was MIDI mapping. So you can click this button, there's also a key command for it. And the buttons that I chose to map were the scene launches for my 4 scenes. I have intro or verse, chorus, and then this is verse 2, and I have a 4th scene launch, but I didn't use it in the end in this performance. And then I have record enable also as a button for some of these tracks. So I have 1 note set for this, 1 note set for that one, and then 1 for this and this and this. I'm using black keys on the piano so that I could trigger it with my foot. If I was using white keys, I couldn't have clicked them individually. I would have probably just accidentally pressed the key next to it, so that was my strange little workaround. Another thing is, again, in live preferences, I had my record arm button set to non-exclusive, so I was able to click more than 1 record enable button at the same time, which again enabled me to make the arrangement view recording while I was also turning on and off the record enable button on every other track. Then what I had preloaded into the session before I started was these 2 vocal tracks, which are just doublings of the vocal harmony in the chorus. It's actually not a harmony, it's literally just a doubling. And then I had these 3 guitar clips preloaded in. I was trying to figure out how to live record them into it and then trigger them, but it just was getting really complicated, so I decided to just go with this 1 guitar line being played over and over again, and then there was also a guitar solo, which happened only in the arrangement view, and also of course playing my bass loop and my drum loop in the beginning of the song. In addition, obviously I am also singing like the lead vocal on top of all of this and triggering all the scenes in the right order, so it just got to be too much to try to figure out how to record each different guitar line in the right place as well. I was just getting overwhelmed, so I was like, no, we're gonna focus on the performance and simplify. You might also notice, if you've used session view, that I have deleted almost all my stop buttons. And this again was because I had so many tracks record enabled at the same time. If I was triggering them, I was accidentally recording loops onto various tracks. There may be a way to get around this other than just deleting almost every stop button, but this was my way of doing this and it worked. So that was great. Just to show you what these loops sound like. This one is the main guitar line in the song. This is one of the guitar chord lines. And then this is also this little atmospheric guitar line, which I would also play live at sometimes, but I wanted it preloaded onto the chorus because the chorus actually happens first in this song and there was no time to really like build up all these loops. I just didn't want it to be one of those looping scenarios where you're just sat there watching somebody play every single loop so that they have like that arsenal of loops. I just would rather get right into the form of the song and have it be a better performance rather than just all about looping, if that makes sense. And then one last thing I think to get you started off on how I did this was to make sure that I have trigger recording in launch as my preference. So that meant that when I launched any scene, it was going to start recording any record enabled tracks right away, and that allowed me to, again, simplify my process. I also made sure to go into this edit tab and go to the record quantization and 16th note quantization so that when I was recording my loops, they were getting automatically quantized and it was just gonna be more in time and more smooth sounding overall. One more thing I did before recording anything was putting some audio effects on these tracks. Ignore these loopers, I'm not using them. That was just to get it sounding nice right away. How I would do this basically was I would start with these clips deleted and these three as well. I would start with this record enabled, but I'm not going to do that because the mic will sound awful. And this record enabled. The first thing I would do at the beginning of the performance is to hit this arrangement view record button, trigger my scene, and start playing my bass line. Then I would unrecord enable the bass, record enable the drums, and trigger the scene again. And trigger the scene again. I didn't do it quite in time, but it'll go now. And then I would unrecord enable the drums, record enable the guitar, you can see that there, and then trigger the second scene and start playing that guitar line, which I'm not going to demonstrate, but you get the idea here. Then at the end of this, that also triggers my vocal lines and everything here. I have this soloed, but you'll see. Anyway, I'm playing out of my speakers, so it's a disaster, but you get the idea. And then in the verse, I would trigger my first scene again, and I would play a new guitar loop here. And then in my second verse, I would trigger this third scene, play a part here. I thought you were an asshole. And then I could trigger my chorus here again whenever I wanted that at the end of the song. And I could also trigger this intro verse part when I have this stripped back section right after one of the solos and also at the end of the song. Then the last thing I programmed was just this lowest B flat to be the stop clip button. So all of the whole session would just stop at that point and the song was over. So yeah, I hope that helped you set up your live set. That's basically just all I did to make this come together. And once I had the right information, I was surprised how easy it was, but figuring out what to do and how to do it in the right order was really, really challenging and honestly very gratifying actually. I also enjoyed a lot of the things that I learned how to do in Ableton, still having never made much use of a lot of these things, but it was cool to know that they're possible for future sessions. I want to say thank you to some of my peers, Cormac, Carla, and Michelle, for researching with me the last few weeks. And do check out my description box because I'm going to put all of the resources that I used for you to check out too if you find them helpful. But yeah, enjoy my demonstration.